Behind me we have the Dewar Stone. The Dartmoor name, Dewar for the devil, it is considered to be a place where the devil lived. From here he set out onto the moor to hunt various people. And there is a legend of a time during a snowstorm when footprints were found on the top of the Dewar Stone where the devil had driven a man over the cliff. Arthur Conan Doyle certainly knew about this place, for he incorporated it in one of his earlier stories about Dartmoor, The Winning Shot.
The Winning Shot was just one of the many short stories that Conan Doyle published during his writing career. And when he travelled to Dartmoor with Fletcher Robinson in 1901, he'd already made a considerable fortune as an author of crime fiction. Now his Hellhound legend was to be the foundation for a new whodunit. And by the time he reached Princetown, he'd made the vital decision which guaranteed the success of the story. Eight years earlier, Conan Doyle had grown weary of his most famous creation. In a final act of destruction, he'd sent the world's greatest detective tumbling to his death over the edge of the Reichenbach Falls. But the murder mystery at the heart of the Hound was so challenging that only one man would have the intellect required to solve it. He decided that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this was a case for Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is arguably the world's most famous fictional Englishman. Even today, tourists flock to Baker Street to follow in the footsteps of the great detective. By placing Holmes at the heart of the Hound of the Baskervilles, Conan Doyle ensured that Dartmoor would be immortalised as a land of mists and mystery. But the clues to the source of the legend lead us way beyond the West Country.
There can be no question that London has become the heartland of the Sherlock Holmes industry. And that's perfectly reasonable, given the fact that most of the Sherlock Holmes stories start or end in London, and many of them take place in what Dr. Watson calls the Great Cesspool. We can be sure, though, that like Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle being a great traveller, he would have gone even further afield to have gathered legends and stories about hounds.
Conan Doyle's carriage driver on the moor was called Harry Baskerville, and he claimed that the author borrowed his name for the story. But at Cliro Court, high up on the Welsh borders, 50 miles north of Bristol, there is evidence to suggest that Conan Doyle had called upon other sources for his inspiration. The current owners of Cliro Court have renamed it the Baskerville Hall Hotel in honour of its apparent association with Conan Doyle's story, an association based around the aristocratic families that resided in this area and the legends that accompany them. Could the key to the legend behind the Hound of the Baskervilles be traced back to this manor?
There have been Baskervilles living on the Welsh borders since the 11th century. And we have here clear evidence of a senior member of the Baskerville family setting up home in the 19th century here at Cliro. He would very much have been looked upon as being local gentry, in the same way that Sir Henry Baskerville was looked upon on Dartmoor in The Hound of the Baskervilles. Adjoining the estate here at Cliro was property which belonged to the first wife of Arthur Conan Doyle, and there is evidence that he came down here in 1897 or 98 in connection with the property deal. He would thus have been very familiar with the name of Baskerville long before he ever met Harry Baskerville on Dartmoor.
And not only does the family name link the Baskervilles to Conan Doyle's story, the walls of Cliro Court are adorned with a crest showing a hound with a spear driven through its head. It's said that the image recalls the tale of a faithful family hound slaughtered by the ill-tempered act of a former Baskerville clan chieftain. Ever since, the death of the head of the family has been announced by the baying of a hound. But there are other ghostly canines that haunt the Welsh borders near Cliro. and Philip Weller has discovered that at least one of them has a pedigree to rival any of the wished hounds or devil dogs on the prowl around Dartmoor.
Wherever you go when you're investigating the background of the Hound of the Baskervilles, you will come across dog stories of a different type. And here we are at the back of the Cliro Court Hotel, where we have the pet cemetery. And beneath some of the gravestones here, we have what really are the hounds of the Baskervilles. The Dartmoor hound infamously has no name at all, and it's extremely unlikely that his name would have been Patch or Nip or Sally as we have here. But in this area, we do have a hound legend, and like that of Dartmoor, it is very much a spectral hound.
The neighbouring village of Cliro has all the hallmarks of a quiet country backwater, but amongst the collection of corner shops, cottages and country houses is a plaque recalling a darker side to this borderland, the legend of a shape-shifting villain named Black Vaughan. "5 miles to the north, at the parish church of Kington, is the medieval tomb of Black Vaughan and his equally feared wife, Gethier the Terrible. Despite all this funereal splendour, it appears that as far as this particular Black Knight is concerned, there's no place like home.
I'm sitting at the bottom of what was once the moat of the home of Thomas Vaughan, known locally as Black Vaughan. There are many legends about Black Vaughan, and many of them concern his constant companion, his black hound. And the spirit of this hound is said to haunt the place and to reappear on the bridge near the house to forewarn the death of members of the Vaughan family. This is rather similar to the legend of Richard Cable on Dartmoor, where hounds gathered around his house on the night that he died. There are other legends about Black Vaughan, however, and it's said that his spirit could change itself into various animals, and he once charged into the local church at Kington in the form of a Herefordshire bull. The local people naturally got fed up with this, and they exorcised his spirit by bell, book and candle, and reduced him to a mass which could be placed inside a silver snuff box. That box was thrown into this moat, and the stone that I'm sitting on was put on top of that box to stop his spirit ever rising again. And again, we have a parallel with the large slab that was put on top of the tomb of Richard Cable on Dartmoor.
So we have two candidates for the legendary Hugo Baskerville. Squire Cabell fits the bill as a wicked lord of the manor on Dartmoor, but Black Vaughan at Kington on the Welsh borders has a close association with a single supernatural hound, and it's a spirit that refuses to lie down.